Here's Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
This is the most important Supreme Court vacancy for this country in at least a generation. Nothing less than the fate of our health care system, reproductive rights for women, and countless other protections for middle-class Americans are at stake. Will Republicans and President Trump nominate and vote for someone who will preserve protections for people with pre-existing conditions? Or will they support a justice who will put health insurance companies over patients or put the federal government between a woman and her doctor? The Senate should reject, on a bipartisan basis, any justice who would overturn Roe v. Wade or undermine key health care protections. The Senate should reject anyone who will instinctively side with powerful special interests over the interests of average Americans. Our Republican colleagues in the Senate should follow the rule they set in 2016, not to consider a Supreme Court justice in an election year. Senator McConnell would tell anyone who listened that the Senate had the right to advise and consent, and that was every bit as important as the president's right to nominate. Millions of people are just months away from determining the senators who should vote to confirm or reject the president's nominee, and their voices deserve to be heard now, as Leader McConnell thought they should deserve to be heard then. Anything but that would be the absolute height of hypocrisy. People from all across America should realize that their rights and opportunities are threatened. Americans should make their voices heard loudly, clearly, and consistently. Americans should make it clear that they will not tolerate a nominee chosen from President Trump's preordained list, selected by powerful special interests, who will reverse the progress we have made over the decades. I yield the floor.
All right, so Leader Schumer there, again saying we should have X, Y, and Z, but back to our original point, Gloria Borger, over to you. It's the 51 votes, and what leverage did Democrats even have? I guess he has to say something.
Well, they don't have any leverage. I think what he's trying to do is outline the stakes that we've all been talking about. And he, of course, talked about the Affordable Care Act, talked about pre-existing conditions.
Roe v. Wade.
Talked about Roe v. Wade, as we've been talking about, and also said that the list that the president put out during the election was a list that was put together by special interests, which is true because it was conservative. It was conservative groups who handed the president a list of people and said, well, these judges would be okay by us. They'd pass our litmus test. So the Democrats are going to fight, but Chuck Schumer is a realist here, and he knows that all he can do is make his political arguments right now because he doesn't have the filibuster.
Laura, what do you think?
Well, all politics is local here, and when the federal Congress is essentially hand-wringing and perhaps conceding that they don't have the votes, they're still trying to signal to people that these will return to states' issues. If there is an overturning after a lengthy process to get it in front of the Supreme Court, to overturn precedent on this level as opposed to narrowing it in some way, he knows he has to signal to people on these very issues about particularly Roe v. Wade and other areas about how important it is to think about local elections. Having said that, however, there is still an opportunity for people to view this case and view Anthony Kennedy's retirement in a way that preserves some level of autonomy for a co-equal branch of government, that being the Supreme Court. Now, I'm not trying to be an overly naive glass half full when I say this. I'm simply saying that as the democratic system works, we are supposed to be able to have these vigorous debates during the confirmation proceeding to assess whether the people will rubber stamp every policy of the executive branch, which is not the intended pursuit of any Supreme Court justice. And many have already had the opportunity to go against the original appointment that was made, Kennedy being one fine example of just that.
Yes.
Yeah. And Ken, but let me just mention for everyone watching, just full transparency's sake, we should mention you work to elect conservative senators. Go ahead.
That's right. I run the Senate Conservatives Fund, and
Right.
I will tell you that at no point in the 4.5 years I've been doing that have our members prioritized anything above getting good constitutionalist judges. And apparently the Federalist Society, supporting the original Federalist view of the Constitution, is somehow a special interest group. It's funny how the Constitution is a special interest group to Chuck Schumer, and he named a bunch of the insurance companies, the medical profession. He talked about outcomes. He talked about outcomes. He wants a judge that doesn't care what the law is, but wants a judge that will institute his outcomes regardless of the law. That is a major difference between what I expect we're going to see from President Trump, like a Neil Gorsuch, who, by the way, did not rubber stamp this president. He ruled against him a number of times in the last year, and what Chuck Schumer would want. That is a stark difference, and it'll play out in our elections this fall.
All right, everyone, stand by, stand by. We got to get it. We're getting our first break in here. We've been covering this breaking news. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy will be turning 82. He has just announced, sent a letter to the president, visited the White House. He will be retiring as a justice on the U.S. Supreme Court effective end of July. What this means moving forward for this court. Will we have a new justice before the all-important midterm election this November? I'm Brooke Baldwin. You are watching CNN.